Are you actually training hard enough to maximize muscle growth? Are you even building any muscle to start with? Because we can get really confused into what feels effective, into what people are saying is the right thing for muscle growth. I can bet that you've probably looked in the mirror and wondered, is anything even growing? When am I ever going to see this visible muscle definition? I've been doing this for years. Why isn't it showing yet? I guess it's so easy to feel like we're just missing this one hack, or that this one new exercise is going to do everything for us, or this one new program. And most of the time comes down to what is it that number one, you're doing in the session, and number two, do you know what true effective reps are? Something I've been speaking about a lot recently. If you've never actually done more reps than what your rep range prescribes, I would question if you're training hard enough. One of my clients actually reached out to me saying, should I do rest pause with every set? I've just been stopping when it starts to feel like it's getting to failure. I'm like, you don't want to stop when it feels like it's going to failure, because that's just a hard rep. That's just a hard set, but it is not actually taking it to the level that you possibly could take it. And there is dozens of research showing we typically misjudge our reps that we have left over until failure. We misjudge where our effort is in relation to failure. So we can technically feel like something is really hard and heavy, but is it actually sending the stimulus that it needs for growth? Because with every set, every exercise that you do, it needs to pass a certain threshold. And most of the time, the thing that's missing is that level of effort. It can even be due to us trying to keep such perfect form, but to be honest, with a lot of the training videos that I've been seeing lately, the biggest bottleneck is not knowing how to actually use your hips properly. And your hips are used in everything. Like, you hinge in a squat, you hinge in cable rows, in any rows. If you can't hinge in a row, chances are you're not even rowing effectively enough. Your hinges are fundamental for glute progress. Knowing how to use your lats is fundamental for glute progress. And if our upper backs, if our upper bodies aren't strong enough, then we're not going to be able to progress our lower body enough to get to a point where it's now reaching its new threshold for growth. One really complicated part of all of this quote unquote hard training is that the more reps that we have to do, the harder it is to actually gauge where we are on the failure point. But just because you're training in the lower rep range doesn't mean you're actually using it effectively, because you have to teach yourself to get to that level. That requires a whole new level of neural learning, of neural patterning. You have to be able to engage those higher threshold motor units, which doesn't just happen. You kind of grow your way there. That is the crux of all of this. But I'm going to break it down into as much detail as I can. I want to dial in on the biggest things that can have you feeling like you're training to failure, have you actually fail a lift almost, but it not being enough for that muscle to grow, because there's other factors that come into it. It also depends on where you are in your journey. Like, are you just starting out as a newbie, which I'm guessing most of you have been lifting for at least a year, 2 years? That is where it becomes a lot harder to keep your motivation when you're not seeing the progress there. Even more so, you have to kind of shift what gives you meaning inside of your training, because you're not going to get it from seeing your logbook go up all the time. But that doesn't take away from the fact that every single rep, every single set needs to be effortful, purposeful, intentful. Just because it's like a 12 rep set, as an example, doesn't mean that you just half-ass the first six. Like, every single one of them needs to be treated like its own rep. You need to focus on where does this muscle insert and where does it attach to. That's where I want to focus for getting the movement to happen, if that makes sense. Like, a lot of women struggle to get the definition, the shape they want in their shoulders, unless you're genetically blessed, because the shoulders are a genetic thing as much as the midsection and your glutes are a genetic thing. They're three biggest genetic, four. There's four. The other one are your calves, shoulders, the midsection, and the glutes. And a lot of that has to do with not effectively doing shoulder training. Like, there are so many mistakes with shoulder training that I see. Even shoulder presses. There's a certification that teaches trainers to stop their clients at like this parallel degrees versus coming all the way down. But do you know how to come all the way down properly? If you're coming all the way down and it's still in this parallel, this line that's in line with your body versus on an angle, that's going to put your shoulders at risk. And many people don't have that range of motion in their shoulders, that shoulder mobility, which leads to rounding over and putting more of the stress in the tissue surrounding the shoulder. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty science of all of this in this episode, well, up front anyway, but I do want to give you some reason as to why things are not as they seem. The same thing happens with even press movements for like chest, especially for back, because when people do cable rows, I don't know whether you've ever noticed yourself do this with pull downs or with rows in their own self. When you're doing a lat pull down, your shoulders might round over a little. When you're doing cable rows, you might have the same thing where your shoulders round over a little. You're not keeping your chest proud. If you're feeling it in your arms or in other areas and your back in itself is not fatiguing or your shoulder blades aren't moving fully, because we need to set our shoulder blades back and down whenever we're doing pressing movements. But with rows and pull downs and back movements, your shoulder blades need to be moving in their full ranges. You need to have a full stretch, get that shoulder blade slack, move away from the spine, and then when you're rowing it in, you need to row in with your shoulder blade because it's a row for your back, not a row for your arms. So you always want to initiate it with that muscle, which is the part in between your spine and your shoulder blade, which also then includes the lat, which is also attached to the shoulder blade and the spine, but in a different area there, but also at the same area. So it's that same motion that you want to think about. And because you're thinking of the lat as well, you also want to be thinking down in like a J shape with your elbow, which is the way I like to explain it to my clients when I'm doing form checks. So these are all parts of what you should be thinking about when you're training. One of the biggest mistakes is asking for form checks and trying to mimic a video on how, like, the videos that are there for form checks are meant to be like, oh, okay, so that's what the exercise is meant to kind of look like. But that does not give you anything for, okay, what is it I need to focus on? What am I going to tune into in this set? And this becomes something that you learn over time, which is why you should not change your programs every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks, not even every 8 weeks. Like, you want to have, well, it doesn't really matter if it's just like a bicep curl with a barbell, with a Beasy bar, with a machine, like who bloody cares? But for the main movements, you want to be doing them consistently over several months, getting better at the movement pattern, then being able to progress upon that movement pattern, learning how to take it to failure, learning how to really push it, and then really tuning into it. That's going to take some time depending on what exercise and its level of complexity as well. And knowing where to put your, like, which exercises you want to full send it in which sets, where you can increase the weight. Do you want to increase the first set or the last set? Well, that really depends on the target of that exercise. Are you trying to train to really increase the strength at the moment? Or is it more so just accumulating as much volume as you can at the moment? Which for things like deadlifts and squats and that kind of stuff that require a lot of skill and coordination, they're not things that you would want to take to that absolute failure point. When it comes to Smith squats, hack squats, pendulum squats, you can full send those. That is once you got that technique in check. Like, you don't worry about full sending anything or taking things to that full max effort until you've got the bracing, the technique, the components of what will allow you to have a longer runway in the future so you can keep progressing without having injury, so you can change your body. Once all that's in check, then you can start to full send it. Because I see so often in split squats, in lunge variations, in squat variations, in hinge variations, even in like press is a squat variation, but like with all of these movement patterns, the hips, they are the biggest factor in why you're not seeing progress. You're not getting deep enough using the range of motion, and the ridiculousness that is online with stopping at parallel with so many things is taking away from your future longevity in this, your future progress in this, because if you're not training in those full ranges of motion in your split squats, they need to be taken to those full ranges of motion. That is your mobility work. That is your flexibility work. That is your joint health. That is your hip health. That is your future strength. Like that is your future longevity. If you're not able to get into those ranges of motion and hold significant amounts of weight in those ranges of motion, be stable underweight in those ranges of motion, you're going to get injured in life. You're going to have back injuries. You're going to have the amount of it's kind of sad. The amount of women 35, 40 that are dealing with hip pain, with knee pain, getting tweaks in their glutes, in their back, getting pulled up for sciatica, which everyone has some level of sciatica, by the way. No one has an even spine. The more that you've been at this, the more that you've been through life doing all different ranges of motion, the more that your spine is going to be in not a straight line, so to speak. But the stronger you are, the more robust you are, the more that you move into these ranges of motion, the better that is going to be for every other lift. And when you're robust, when you're stable in ranges of motion for ranges of motion, that is allowing you to get the full lengthened muscles under load progressively. Now you're going to grow because you're not going to be engaging a hell of a lot of muscle fibers if you're cutting your ranges of motion short. Like there are some people that I see just like bopping up and down, like the reps haven't started. I'm not judging you. I'm wondering how often people film themselves and watch themselves in between sets because it honestly changed the game. Anyway, that's a long-winded intro into what we want to make sure that we're looking out for when we're going for the technique. We want to be able to slow our reps down. We want to be able to control our reps. When you're starting into a program, when you're starting into trying to take your exercise to the next level, wanting to maximize every exercise, learning it under accentuated tempo, accentuated control, pausing in the end ranges for longer than you typically would, like 2-3 seconds. And I mean elephant seconds, which I have a challenge coming up soon so people can learn where to focus if that's something you're interested in. We're gonna dive deep into all of the movement patterns, all of the problem movements. I challenge you to get that pause for long enough. A nice long pause at the bottom of an RDL at your patella. You don't need to go too low. You don't get extra points for going lower. You don't get extra growth for going too low because you're not loading your hamstrings or your glutes there. That's just loading your back. But stop at your patella tendon a little bit lower if you're able to still keep maximum tension. And then think about what muscles are you using to pull that bar up? What are you thinking? Because a common one is people just pull the bar back up with their torso. I see that with the hyperextensions as well. But it's not a pulling movement from there. It's a pushing movement. You want to push into the floor with your feet. And you want, if anything, you're pulling through your glutes. You're pulling through your big toe, through your feet, through your hamstrings, through your glutes. But that's because you're pushing through the floor. It's just a counterforce of the ground because muscles only pull, they don't push. But we're thinking push into the floor so that the posterior chain pulls you up. That's one example. We're now going into a couple of the variables that I see a lot of us kind of get confused over. There is so much out there on you only need 2 sets. And then on the other hand, there's a ton of people doing junk volume, more exercise, more sets, because it makes you feel like you're doing a lot of work. So it should mean more progress. But the thing is, you'll not get any growth out of 2 sets if the total volume is not enough to like cross that threshold. But also, it's not about the number of sets. And there's also a lot of questions about how long do you train for? Is this enough? Like, what's the optimal XYZ? But all of those questions don't really matter if we're not looking at how are you actually training within that. What exercises are we talking about? 2 sets of really hard deadlifts are way more taxing than 2 sets of leg curls. But how is that also scheduled over the whole week, you might have a lot of hamstring training through the week already. So maybe the 2 sets of hamstring curls is all that you needed. And what is the purpose of the deadlift? Like, I have someone doing 5 sets of squats, but we're not training to push it to failure, and we're not training for let's completely exhaust yourself. We're trying to learn a skill. And this is where just general advice is probably what's holding most people back in their training, because it's not the one magic hack. It's missing enough hard sets that are of quality, because true form failure also brings into mind, how are you entering the gym? What's your state of, I guess, we can call it state of arousal, state of mentality. Something I used to do when I was in my best athlete element, which consequently performance is the driver of physique change. And my performance was at an all-time high. When I put this is something that I only just realized because I was reading a book the other day. I'm like, holy shit, I used to do this. I need to start doing it more. I visualized every single set before I went into that set. And that visualization allows you to practice it before you do it and get yourself into the zone so you can just load it. The grunting, the slowing down reps, they matter so much more than you think. And if your reps aren't slowing down, are you actually training hard enough as well? So before it was, if you're not doing more reps than your rep range prescribes every so often, are you actually training hard enough? I would expect to see numbers outside of the rep range that I prescribe my clients many times, especially for upper body, because you're simply not going to increase the load all that much. If you think about it, like, it is kind of ridiculous to think that you're going to be increasing your bench press, your shoulder press by 2 kilos, or seeing yourself go up the dumbbell rack on a monthly basis. There was this moment where I started amping myself up for a leg press set. I get in my head about the leg press quite a lot. What I noticed was I was actually writing, because I write notes in my phone with how I go through the sets, which you should all be doing. Like, don't just log your reps and your sets and what weights you use. It should be your training journals. It should be everything that goes into your training, the thoughts that you're having during your session. If you turn it into like this relationship with training, it's going to have its ups and downs. It's going to have its trouble moments where nothing is progressing. It's going to have the moments where you're just not feeling it at the moment. It's going to have its highs, but most training sessions are just going to be average. You're going to be lifting for years, hopefully, to come. So it's kind of ridiculous to put so much pressure on yourself every single session to just be this superhero. And I was writing all these like negative things, which obviously wasn't helping. I'm like, come on, snap out of it. Snap out of it. Your mind is going to dictate all of this. And if you stay in a negative mindset, then the rest is just going to feel like ass. I was just trying to pep talk myself, kind of turn my lollies that I have during my workout into like my mental game fuel. The timing of your training also impacts so much of what is considered failure training or hard training, because the same things can feel exponentially harder. You might not even be able to reach your normal levels of strength and performance if you're training at a later time or an earlier time, whichever times are completely your no-go zone. Like, my sessions have somehow turned into 5 days a week. By that, I mean sometimes I only get 3 exercises in my session because I've tapped out after my first 2. Then I just try to get in a third because I show up too late. And like, this is the thing. This is like the seasons of life. Like, I might not be maximizing things every single session, but I'm still laying the brick. And if I'm not building muscle in that session, at least I'm maintaining it. But what's the net accrual over time? But at the same time, your sessions aren't building muscle. They're creating the stimulus to allow for it. That's where the food comes in. But it doesn't matter. Like, if you think of it like building a house, there's like the bricks. You can have all the bricks in the world there, but if there are no workers, the bricks being the food, if there are no workers, if the training isn't hard enough, then those bricks are just going to lie there. And that's where that fat accumulation comes from. Like, you're putting on fat, not muscle. But then you can have all the workers in the world. You can be training your ass off. But if there aren't enough bricks to lay, you're probably just doing enough. In fact, you're probably doing overdose, which if you keep trying to force on the workers, You're going to become broke at some point because you're just working them. You're paying for extra workers than they don't have. Like that, you would be more efficient with less workers, kind of thing. And that actually pays it. If you aren't fueling your body enough, then you're not going to be recovering enough. And very soon that becomes maladaptation, where you'll just stop responding in general. Then if you have even less bricks, because now you want to go into deficit because you're not happy with the way that your body composition is turning out, you're probably getting bloated and inflamed because of the excess stress. That's the extra money load. Well, now you have less. If you add in even more cardio, so probably you'll pay extra money now for machines to come in, and they cost a lot to run, but you're not able to teach them any skills. So it's not like they're going to be skilled laborers for you. That's just extra cost. You don't have a lot of bricks. That is when you start losing muscle, because you've been in this phase for so long. And that's why a lot of women, as soon as they hit perimenopause, now you can't hide from anything. You can't hide from anything. Before, the fact that you had optimal hormones was able to at least push you through it. The fact that you had a lot more to give. You don't have that much to give anymore. Your anabolic potential is it's compromised because your muscles they don't have the same response to training stimulus, to protein. It's not that fat loss is harder. Fat loss is just as simple. It's just as easy, quote unquote. The only hard thing about fat loss is being able to do it for long enough and make the sacrifices, which a lot of people in mid-age don't want to. Or there are other things that impact your metabolism, like your ability to move the same way. Like, we aren't as agile and as active and as the kids that have like ants in their pants, like that kind of stuff slows down as you age. That is a lot that actually accumulates to a lot if you are a small female. Things don't work the same for us. Every little bit, you feel ashamed for worrying about the smallest of things. No, you should not be. Like, those things are actually huge things for us. Small things for big people, small things for males that have more muscle and the higher metabolism. The size difference is huge. Shrink that to a female average size difference now is notable, but then shrink that to a petite woman and it's like the little things are kind of really big things. That's why not even just petite women. If you have a lot more fat mass and you're under-muscled, like, we have a huge issue in our society where the majority of women, we don't have a lot of muscle. That's the biggest issue, but we're all pushing the fat loss label over and over. I'm not telling you eat more and gain more weight. That's the last thing that we want to do. Holding a lot of body fat is not metabolically healthy, but doing the same things the same way isn't going to get you a different result. So something somewhere needs to change. Maybe it's just you need to just take a mental break away and understand what the process is meant to look like. And once you understand it, then you can actually do it a lot more effectively and have a more effective diet phase. But the majority of people can body recomp without a surplus, at least for a good year. Because most women I see have so much left in the tank, in their training. It's once you've tapped that out that we can start to push a surplus, unless you're already extremely lean and slender and super skinny fat. Then it does kind of serve you to put yourself through a surplus, and then the fat can easily be lost without losing all that much muscle. You honestly do not lose all that much muscle. The only reason it seems that way, if you do things the right way, is because you're losing a lot of the sarcoplasmic, the puffiness of the muscle look. That's kind of where we get a little confused when our legs feel like they're this puffy thing, but they're not. That's the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy around the muscle cell. There is so much more that I want to go into, but I just wanted this one to really touch home on why it can feel like we are doing all the things, we're putting in such hard work. We feel like we're taking things to that failure point, but it's not doing what we want it to. I also think that one of the biggest reasons women don't build the body they want is because they don't fully trust themselves to push themselves to the point where a set can actually change them, because it hurts. Got a question saying, how do you get over the mental block of knowing that we really need to push ourselves, make training feel as hard as you say it needs to feel? I think we need to get over the idea that training just gets easier, because it doesn't. You always have to make it hard. I think it's changing our relationship to that hard. That is the mindset shift that can change everything for you. From my experience, and something that I've heard from clients is that they're actually able to push themselves a hell of a lot more now, because it's not like they're thinking in their mind, oh my goodness, I still have a billion more exercises to do. I have all of these sets to do that they previously had in other programs. This comes back to you can be training to your max and failing without it actually sending enough of the right stimulus to the muscle, as you might be mentally capping yourself and pacing yourself for it, because it's like, oh my god, this is the last set, and then you just like it's kind of technically failure, but you didn't put that same amount of grrr into it. So I hope this kind of helped and gave you a few things to think about when you go into your next session. But if you have any questions at all, if it's made you think twice about your own lifting, reach out to me on Instagram, transformxruby. I would love to answer your questions. I'd love to get more questions for my podcast, and hopefully the next time you go into the gym, you give one of my strategies a go with amping yourself up, with approaching your sets with the posture in mind, with the shoulder blades in mind, with where does a muscle insert in your mind, and giving yourself enough of space to visualize the movement even. What is it that I'm meant to focus on here? What do I need to get out of this for it to reach the effective threshold? Also make sure that you're fueling yourself enough going into the sessions, because that can make a hell of a difference. Create a mental ritual to get you into the zone. That is another one of my little favorite tips. So with that, you'll hear me on the next episode, and it will mean the world to me if you could rate my podcast 5 stars, and you'll hear me there.